This employee, they were taking leads. They had set up some fake distributorships across the US, and then they were reselling our product for other employees, knew exactly what he was doing and participated. And then all of a sudden, his department was completely eliminated, practically minus 2 people. And they had recorded thousands of hours of meetings and phone calls and all sorts of things, knowing that they would get to court eventually.
Today, I'm here with Nicolas Breedlove, who is the CEO of NVB Playgrounds. He stepped into an industry with no background and no blueprint, facing real challenges around trust, setbacks, and what it takes to rebuild and lead differently. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Jana.
Yeah, well, I'd like to dive right into it and have you take us to a moment where you made a decision that changed the trajectory you were on.
Absolutely. Moment, it was probably around 12 years ago, and we had a little bit of a issue with an employee that was taking some privileged information and kind of reworking it for their own enrichment. And so they were taking leads, they were taking a lot of different pieces of the business. And then they were, the way our company is set up, we have distributors in probably around just about every state. We've got around 200 plus that are active, and we supply those companies with a variety of different commercial playground equipment because that's what we do. We manufacture commercial playgrounds. So we empower about 200 plus entrepreneurs across America, and we allow them to resell our product. And we have operations in Savannah, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Indianapolis, and we distribute our product all across the United States. And this employee, they were taking leads. They were taking, they had set up some fake distributorships across the US, and then they were reselling our product, which, it's one of those gray areas. It's like, you put all that trust in somebody to set up distributorships to help empower all these small business owners. And he was taking a lot of those leads for himself. And at the time we were scaling big time, we were going from 20 to 40 million in revenue, and just a lot of things were missed back then. We just didn't have the foresight. We didn't have the systems in place to really execute along the way where we needed to. And it led to a big pivotal moment for me as a leader in the company.
And so what were the constraints you were under at the time then, would you feel? Like, I mean, it sounded like this was a key person. So, kind of what was happening in that environment for you?
Yeah. When I think about that moment, and I've had replications of that moment throughout the years, the bigger you grow, for some reason, it doesn't get easier, even with systems in place. Sometimes I feel like lately, over the last probably 5 years, I feel like some people, they just sneak on through still. But I think the constraints, the biggest things for me was like, you mean the constraints or what was at stake? I guess for me, constraints would be the systems that we had. Our systems were lacking the data and the checks and balances that we needed to be able to say, this was happening. And I, as a manager and as a leader back then, I wasn't a huge believer in giving things away. I had too many hats and I wore them for too long. As a founder, I was this typical entrepreneur story, right? Like we have too much control. We want all the control, but we don't want, and then we get so surprised when things go off track, right? And it's no surprise actually when things go off track, but it was, of course, a big surprise for me. It's like, what happened? How did I do this? And, I'd say that's the biggest constraint is the data. We had a big data problem.
Yeah. And so it made it difficult to see what was going on. And so what would you say the stakes were then?
The stakes, you could start at, it's very simple for me. We have all those distributors and we put a lot of time into those relationships. I've known some of them for going on 20 years, and we're 20-year-old company right now. So back then it would have been, just as old, 10-year-old distributor and relationships that we had built. And I had nurtured those relationships into what they were and what they are. some of them are 20, $30 million companies at this point. But back then, they were $5 or $10 million companies. And that's a lot of revenue. The idea of, hey, lying to all of them, being a part of the lie, I should say, not myself, but, we had built this company where we would always give leads out. We're big on marketing and giving out leads and opportunities. And I love to be able to be different than all of my competitors. And that's one thing that none of them do. So we've always been doing that. And, to have somebody betray that trust, it sucked. And so when I think about like the trust value that we lost in that moment, I think about that. I think about, because it's one of those things where in business, there's always somebody else to do business with, and in those moments, in that moment there, it was like, I was feeling a lot of guilt on myself. How did I let this happen? And then how do we talk to people? Because it was one of those situations at the time where, the lawyers are telling us, don't say anything to anybody. So on one hand, we had this problem happen where all of a sudden, we're finding out, distributors are asking, hey, why is your employee selling in our territory under this brand? And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, crap. What do you mean? Bob, our employee Bob, is selling our playgrounds in a territory maintained by someone else. And it's like,
Mm.
how? Well, it leads to a lot of fun conversations. And it just leads to one of those relationship moments where it's like, yeah, we made some mistakes and we had to own it really quickly.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying that one, which is one a really important factor, is that you had relationships on the line because when you break trust, I mean, even like you said, there are other people out there to do business with, but as we all know, like in our industries, news travels and we get reputations. So, that's obviously was significant. And then I assume there was revenue on the line as well, because any one of those could walk away because they'd be angry. And then I'm sure there was an element of morale, maybe even?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I put this person in charge of a big piece of the company, like one of probably 10 or 12 different divisions at the time. Back then, there was way too many under myself. And, everybody around him, that was a secondary issue. It's like an onion in those situations. And the more you peel, the stinkier it gets and the more you end up crying. And I think it was probably after about a week, we realized that 4 other employees knew exactly what he was doing and participated, right? And then all of a sudden, his department was completely eliminated, practically minus 2 people, because we couldn't have them there if they were involved. And they were out there writing Google reviews and helping him maintain relationships outside of the company. And it was one of those moments where it's like, all of a sudden you make this giant cut and it's just all happens at once. And the rest of the company, they can know a little bit, but they can't know everything, right? But the rumor mill starts pretty quick in those situations, especially in a smaller company, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. And so what did you feel, or did you even maybe make it this far in your reflection, but what the personal risk was for you?
Personal risk,
Mm,
there's a lot of risks. This, I've been through a few of these at this point in my career, and they all go through when people are, I don't know what they are, if they're bad or what's going on, but when they're guilty and they're truly guilty or they feel that guilt, a lot of them tend to go through a very similar approach and they end up they try and deflect another situation that doesn't really even exist. Like in this particular case, he started saying rumors about me
mm,
personally, right? And it's like, that of all the things, I fathered children with all these people, right? Meanwhile, what he didn't know was that all my kids have to be in vitro because I can't have kids the normal way, you know? And he would make up rumor after rumor after rumor, and he was spreading them around to other employees. And it became like this weird battle of like trying to affect me personally in my personal relationship with my distributors, telling distributors, oh, I knew that he was doing this, or I knew all these things. It's like, if that's the case, then why are you not here? And then, and then with the vendors, trying to affect my vendor relationships that I've also nurtured
mm.
throughout the years, whether that's, factories overseas or factories here in the US or variety of different relationships that he was a prize to. So I think of all those things, and I had a lot on the line, and I was a much more immature adult back then. So, I didn't handle it too well. I probably drank too much and did a lot of things that it didn't exactly help me overcome things on a short
Mm.
term level, as sometimes we approach things not always with the best.
I think there's other entrepreneurs out there who could relate.
Yeah. So, it took me a while to even say, gosh, A, how to let this happen? And then B, okay, I lived in the moment of this guilt and this whatever for a minute. Now I've got to get over it and I've got to get past it. I've got to do what's right for my employees, and what's right for me, my family, and everybody else. And it's one of those moments where you're like trying to rebuild and
Mm,
desperate to not go backwards, right? Like I
mm.
didn't want to fall backwards. I was always after more revenue. I was never really after profit. And maybe that was, it's not a necessarily a common theme, but I was definitely after revenue at a certain point. I wanted to be the biggest guy out there in the online space. And it didn't take long to be the biggest guy in the playground equipment online space. So I probably could have slowed down on the revenue gain, but it was difficult for me. I will say
So in
that.
this moment, what was the decision you were trying to make? I mean, I assume there's the obvious that you had to terminate your employee, but was it really a decision about how you were going to rebuild?
I think the decision was a little bit about the rebuild. It was more about like what kind of company do I really want to have, and
Mm,
do I want to work here?
mm,
And, am I willing to do what it takes? Because this is like that 20% across the finish line that's really tough for people. And do I really have it in me to do this all over again? And it felt like I had to go from the bottom up. It felt like I didn't trust anything anymore. This employee had gone through a lot of obviously a lot of internal dialogue in their heads. And they had recorded thousands of hours of meetings and phone calls and all sorts of things, knowing that they would get to court eventually. And for a long time, I would sit at a table, and if somebody put a phone on the table, I'd be like, "Oh God, now what are they trying to set me up for here?"
mm.
So there was a lot of other things associated with it, more than just that. But I think the decision at the end of the day is like I said there, it's what kind of company do I want to work at, and how do I get there?
And so when you were reflecting on that, what did you see that your options were?
I think that's probably the beginning of me being really freaking lost, right? Like I didn't have the right people around me, like friend wise, my friend group as a young man, I wasn't growing my friend group the way I needed to. I enjoyed the people I was around, but not necessarily was growing in a positive way. Um, uh, you know, so I think that That's that's a tricky it's for me, mm, I don't know on that one.
Well, I mean,
It's a
so
it's a
I think
it's
there's obviously you touched on a little bit. You said, "Well, do I even want to continue this company?" So I assume the alternative of that was what, you'd go get a regular job?
I thought about that multiple times, and I thought about that, so many times, but I can't do it,
Mm,
I don't it's not in my soul, like, I can't quit. You're gonna have to rip it from me out of my cold, bloodless hands. It's just not gonna happen. So, it's just a matter of what's left, and do I wanna keep building? And I had to make a decision. Do I wanna keep building a bigger company, or do I want something I can control?
mm,
And I wanted something I wanted to keep building, which meant that I needed to change the way I looked at business. I changed the way I looked at leadership, changed the way I looked at being able to delegate, do all the things that I was uncomfortable doing, and creating the relationships in business to be able to learn those skills at a very quick rate. Otherwise, I was going to be falling behind again. So, I needed to integrate a business models like a modified version of EOS. I needed to
mhm.
implement checks and balances throughout the entire network of employees. I needed to trust people again.
And it sounds like you may have even ended up changing or thinking about changing basically who your external advisors were, whether they be friends or just the people who had influence or the sounding board that you were using?
Yeah, I think that what pivotal moment for me back then was realizing that I needed more people that were entrepreneurs and people that were much smarter than me, and I hated being the person in the room. I joined groups like MMT, which is Mastermind Talks. I've been on a lot of Wayfinder trips, which they're entrepreneur-led organization. They go on, spiritual and non-spiritual journeys across the world, and just being able to be around other entrepreneurs that are like-minded or a much different scale than me. I met a guy last year. He ran a card company for over $1 billion, and there's all sorts of people that have so much more value in regards to learning from. And I just wasn't putting myself out there in a way where I could really understand how to learn.
Mm.
I was kind of unapproachable. I was a very stubborn guy back then, and I thought, if I didn't know it, why would I want to? Not a very smart way of going about things.
Did you, when you were evaluating this, because it sounds like you said, while you entertained briefly the idea of just quitting and getting a job, you, like most entrepreneurs, probably felt like you were unemployable, not where your heart is, like you said. You had the option of rebuild, like taking the company and maybe holding it steady and just kind of being in a safe mode where you could control it all yourself. I don't know what revenue number that is, but some revenue number where you could have your fingers basically in all areas and control it, or you could scale it and put in the systems both in the company and in your life that you needed to scale it. Was there one that you were drawn to initially from instinct, or was
And
it a
my
real
instinct is
battle?
always to grow. My
Mm,
instinct is always for more, and I I think that over the years, though, more means a few different things to me nowadays. So, I enjoy the build and I enjoy the climb of it all. And, I've started a few different companies, and I think there's positives to a lot of it. But nowadays, in the world we live in right now, you can build a company and scale it with very limited resources in regards to people. And it's easier than ever before, right? So I think that, back then, you needed a team to call, you needed a team to do this, and all these different teams of people to run different departments. And as much as we have physical product and we have a very unique product and we have big, oversized freight and containers and all sorts of different things, aspects to how we do business. I enjoy being able to, with my newer products, I enjoyed being able to do software. I enjoyed being able to do other aspects when necessarily thinking about scaling in the same sense anymore.
mm,
I think of it a little bit differently. At the end of the day, I enjoy the build. I enjoy being able to take an idea and get it to the right group of people and assemble them to sell whatever that is to the populace and try and make something good out of it.
mm. So do you remember a specific moment then where you finally made the decision and decided you were like all in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was me and Lacey. She's now my wife. And she even to this day still tries to convince me once in a while. Hey, let's just slow it down. Let's take a step back. Let's just right size ourselves and not put ourselves on the line. And she has there's rights and wrongs to that. And I think that I don't know, there's just a certain part of me that always thinks that if your goal is level, it's a negative. And if your goal is slightly positive, it's a level. And if your goal is more than that, then you've got something. And that's just the way I look at it. It's really hard for me to break that mentality. I don't know that it's ever really going to break. I think that I always want that next step because I always see there's opportunity.
Mm. So you were in that moment and what she was saying at that time, let's just right size it. And you were
Yeah,
saying, nope, I'm all in, I'm going big.
all in. I'm gonna go in, and she was right there with me. She said, "Okay, let's do this. And she's still here. And, now we're married after, some fun years. I think that without her support, I definitely, even though she doesn't agree with it a lot, she supports it. And but it's definitely a difficult choice to make.
Mm.
But that would have been the moment. And then from there, it's about how do we get there? What do we need? And, she helped me figure out, this is the kind of groups you need to be a part of. These are the types of people that we need to bring in. We need to improve our leadership. We need to cut down on the people we manage. We need to do all these things. You need to be smarter about your decisions, all these fun things. And you need to slow down your life. You need to stop drinking and change the way you are.
I was about to ask, yeah, what did you have to say no to make this work then?
I'd say, I think it's, I look back at those at that time of my life, and I think, I was a completely different person. And a lot of, you read books and you see a lot of people, they say that you're pretty much set in your ways at a certain age in life, men in their 18 to 20s. And I definitely am not the same person I was back then. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a conscious decision you have to make. You don't want to be this type of person. And I want to be good for all of my people, all of my employees, all of my distributors. I want to be honest. There's, what is it? Mercenaries and the opposite of mercenary. I don't remember anymore. A good friend of mine always uses it as an analogy, but I like to give a lot of what I have
Mm.
to the team, my time, whatever. I love to see people succeed. So
So you had to say no to a lot of your old behaviors and basically say yes to new ones. Is that sum
yeah,
it
I
up?
mean, I had to give up my life the way that I thought I wanted to live it, this party life, this life
Mm.
of all of this other crap going on in the world that I was creating for myself. And I had to say, I have to refocus everything on
Mm.
business and on what we do and how I learn. Because, I was kind of, it was a two-pronged thing that happened there. This person that came in my life that screwed up my business, in quotations. I allowed it to happen. I got
Right.
a little lazy, all right? And
Mm.
I had my eye off the ball. And as a result, I left the door open. And when the door's open, anybody can walk in. So,
That's a huge lesson that I think a lot of people just in life don't learn, that basically everything is all our fault and everything's our fault. Like, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, but it can all be boiled down to what we can control. And once we accept that, then we realize we have much more control about where we're headed and what our future looks like.
yeah, I have plenty of Catholic guilt as it is. So my internal guilt bar is way up there. So
Are you a
I don't,
firstborn child too?
yes. Yeah. And so I'm guilty on all counts all the time. And I feel it
Mm.
24 hours a day.
Yep.
So that's, it's just where I live.
I understand that. So when you think about it and you reflect on that moment and what made you decide to go big, I guess, right? Let's go for it. We're going to do this again, get back on the horse and drive the growth. Do you know what your underlying principle or belief was at that time? Like, what was it that made you feel that that was the right decision?
Lacey, my wife, she'll probably say it's a little bit of ego, and
Mm.
she's probably a little bit right. I think there is a little bit in there always. I think without that little bit, you never have the strength or the capacity to pursue it in the first place, the will. Without a little bit of that, it's just untamed that becomes a problem. For me, I think that it's I I enjoy I love to create it, man. Rebuilt an entire website probably 3 weeks ago myself, just myself, coded it out, everything. It took about a week and a half to do it from the ground up, and I love that stuff. I love being able, but now the whole team uses it. It's creating real leads, real assets. It's integrated within an ERP and CRM, Acumatica, HubSpot. I love that kind of stuff. And I think that, man, I just get super energized from being able to do that stuff and see being able to see within 1 week, be able to see a lead and a new deal I created go straight into the pipeline, straight into sales, hundreds of thousands of dollars, just moving over there. It's just a lot of fun. It just gives me a lot of energy. I don't know. There's something about that. I love selling too. It's
Mm,
one of the things. So I love marketing end of things, but I also love selling. And there's just this rush, and the salespeople get it, and they get so much excitement out of that. And for me,
yeah.
I get to see it on both sides. I get the marketing end of it. I get the sales end of it. Also, I get to see it from a whole different level with finance and accounting and operations. Yay. It's not quite the same feeling over there for me, but
Mm,
it's a rush. And
critical
part
understanding.
of it, I think, is that rush. It's like I'm just going so fast sometimes that it's just a real rush to be able to
Well,
operate.
so I could be wrong, but it sounds like,
Probably aren't.
though, the principle may be that you understood your makeup, right? What drives you, what keeps you motivated, what's required for you to succeed, and therefore, since you're the leader of the company, what's required, what do you need in order to enable other people to succeed? And so you held true to that, your DNA basically of what excites you, where your skill set is, and what people will pay for.
I would agree with that. Every time that I haven't held true to what my unique abilities are, I've always landed myself in trouble.
Mm,
If I try and be a CEO 24 hours a day, this company will be screwed. I am not the CEO 24 hours a day. That's just not who I am. I am the marketing guy. I am a lot of things, but I am not always the perfect little nice knitted little CEO that they saw a lot of people think exists in the world. It just doesn't for me, right?
mm.
And there's CEOs that are accounting wise and ops wise. I'm just not that guy. And I've tried to sit in all those seats and I just can't do it. So, finding some really, really talented people over the last couple of years has allowed me to kind of sit where I need to sit. I've got a really talented guy in sales. He's been there for a while. I've got a super talented guy in ops. And both of those guys come from, they come from companies, billions of dollars in revenue, right? And I'm very fortunate to be able to have them with me and to be able to learn from them. And
Mm.
shoot, I, I'm, I'm very grateful to have those kind of people around me at this point in my career.
Well, I mean, I think that shows a sign of maturity in entrepreneurialism is when you start to understand where your skills lie and where you need to hire the right people. And then, I mean, obviously you have to keep hiring as you scale, keep hiring the right people until basically you're, the strategist. But yeah, I mean that's the journey of an entrepreneur through the scale cycle. But I'm curious, if you go back to the decision and the decision that you made, if somebody were there at the time frame and maybe it's Lacey, what would they have said your blind spot was? Or did Lacey even specifically, call out a blind spot?
My blind spot is definitely my heart. I've got a lot of heart in it. And sometimes it means sometimes I allow myself to ignore some of the obvious things in the room. And, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just burn everything down around me. But a lot of times I've got a heart for some stuff that I shouldn't. And that means I allow things to happen that shouldn't. And that's where sometimes she has to come in and play cleanup. Um, is when I don't, I'm not that consistent as I need to be. And she is a very consistent person. She believes in consistency, and she's we're the yin and yang opposites in regards to a lot of different things with that.
No, it's very useful to have somebody who counterbalances you. I have that in my own life. Um, so then, let's look at what happened. Now fast forward, it sounds like 10 years, and when you reflect back, what was the outcome of that decision?
Outcome of that decision was I would say I understand, like, back then I thought core values were garbage, right? I thought, they're written at Burger King's walls. They couldn't mean anything. They were written on the building we bought. So at the time we had bought a Sam's Club, and inside of because they were going on a selling spree back around COVID. So they sold a bunch of them, and we bought one up at a deal. And there's, core values written on the wall. And you're like, God, this is garbage. And, a few months later, I'm dealing with this problem. And then, One of the biggest things is like, all these entrepreneur guys or, that I'm trying to get into groups who are like talking about their core values and all this crap. And I'm like, what does this even mean? And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around it, but for me, it was like a realization all these years later, like, wow, like it's more than just like some value. It's more about like, this is what this place is about.
Right.
These are the types of people that we have. If you don't like it, that's not a big deal. You just can't be a part of us. It's
Exactly.
it's it's no problem whatsoever, but this is what we need you to be to succeed here. And there is no rhymes about it. Like it's no big deal, but get out or come in. Give you a hug or hug you goodbye. But there ain't no in between.
Mm.
And I think that was probably one of my biggest things I walked away with and I walk away with even today is like the fluidity and even today, the fluidity in which we still have to live in those values. Like as a company, whether it's COVID or whether it's some new problem like tariffs last year, right? Had to change the type of company we needed to be at the time. And there'll be another thing in a few years. Right now, there's the war in Iran, right? And anybody that's shipping anything freight is going to be dealing with surcharges pretty soon because you're looking at $6 for diesel fuel, which means if you're
Mm.
buying anything, it's going to cost more money. It's always a new thing.
So obviously, you learn the value of core values, which I agree totally goes into it's the DNA of who a company is and whether if people are the right fit or not. It's a litmus test. And then you're talking about, flexibility. So as a company, you have to be flexible. Where has the company gone? Like, I mean, like, has it grown? It sounds like you've recovered, from, maybe some of those broken relationships. Like, what does the picture look like now versus at that point when you were making the decision?
Sure. The company has grown. I think we breached 60 million a few years ago, maybe
Uh,
2 or 3 years ago, which isn't incredible in my like own perception of things. But that's just because I'm hard on myself on that. But uh, I used to think it was number of employees or it was this or that. And the more I get through it and the more I develop as an entrepreneur, it's more about like, I would much rather pay those 75 employees a lot of money than have 200 employees I don't get to pay as much money to. So, it's no offense to the employing more people. It's more about I would love to really offer a great life to
hmm,
some people. And, for me, that means more developed skill sets, a lot less irresponsible parties, which means that it goes along with what everybody's afraid of in life right now, which is automations and all those terrible words that go around that. It doesn't mean that the end of jobs. It just means that their jobs are a lot, if anything, they're more safe than ever because they're more skilled and they
mm,
are really dedicated to some sort of function rather than picking something up and putting it down, only being able to answer the phones. No, you don't answer the phones. You answer the phones and you go through these things and you follow up on these things and you go through this CRM and this CRP and this and that and that. It's an endless to it. So as far as where we're at there, and then we've grown a little bit. But as a company, we also changed in the last couple of years. We've changed again. And we used to be 70% quick ship. So we were inventorying a ton of merchandise. And more over the past 2 years, we started doing more custom work, which means that it's not our standard turnaround of a 2 week turnaround. It's more about an 8 to 12 week turnaround, which changes our cash flow, changes a lot of different things about how we operate. So it just presents more change. So, I mean, we're always going to be changing. And then over the last 6 months, we introduced a SaaS product. So, and that's pretty unusual for this industry. And we like to kind of do things a little unusual. And that this industry doesn't really take care of their product in an aftermarket.
mm,
You sell 100,000, $1 million playground, and they're just like, well, there it is.
have fun.
Yeah, have fun. And they don't tell the operator, hey, you know what? It's going to cost you
Mm,
just as much as it is right now, today, over the next 20 years to maintain it. They don't tell you that it's going to, you're going to have an injury on this playground and you're going to get sued. They don't tell you that you need to you need to do these things. So I wanted to read that second mountain book probably a few years ago, which is, about, just trying to figure out where your next step is in life and where are you as a human being. And I wanted to build another business. And I thought, what's going to be meaningful and impactful in the playground world? And there's about 400,000 hospital visits for kids here in the US. And I thought, how can I be a part of that? I had a brand that I hadn't invested any time or money in, and that was playgrounds.com. So we have a lot of domain assets. Playgroundequipment.com is our equipment brand, but playgrounds.com ended up being a SaaS brand. And so we sell essentially it's aftermarket software, and we provide QR tags for playgrounds,
Mm,
and it allows parents and teachers or whatever to report issues, and it
right.
sends the feedback back to the owner operators, and they can fix things before hopefully a kid gets injured, right? And hopefully we can have a meaningful impact. And that's my next thing is boy, that would be an interesting BHAG, would be to meaningfully impact injuries across the US with a single application. That
Mm.
would be impactful. So we'll see.
You always got to keep climbing. So when you think, like, let's pretend somebody else now was in similar shoes as you, like they're at a point where maybe a bottom point for their company, maybe it's due to fraud, maybe it's something else, right? But what would you suggest somebody facing a similar decision? How should they focus on the problem or the decision that they're making?
How should they focus on the problem or decision that they're making? I think taking a minute to think about it and really, really plan that out with and looking at a few different scenarios. For myself, I kind of lost my own faith back then, and I was probably too much invested in myself and didn't think about others as much as I needed to. And not that you need to in that situation. It's a very selfish moment, if anything. You need to decide whether or not you're going to keep pursuing this dream of yours or not. If anything, it's a selfishly led task. One could argue. I think that you know it really shakes you up as a human being. These moments. I think the only thing that's it's so freaking difficult. If you can accept that it's going to be difficult, and you can accept that it's going to be difficult again in your life, then you're going to be fine. If this is what it takes, then you're not. It's not cut out for everybody. And the scaling that some of us do in life, when you get to over 50 million or you get to over 20, that your percentage as a human being in percentage of the rest of the population of entrepreneurs just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There are less and less people that you can talk to about your problems. There are less things. There's less resources. So you really you have to make that decision for yourself. Do you really want this? And why? Why do you want it? Is it your ego? And if it isn't, just admit whatever it is. Because for me,
Mm.
I can admit it's partially my ego. Absolutely. I have no problem admitting that, but I also love the rest of it too. I love being able to provide people a place to live. I love being able to see them get their house and their car and their everything else that they get to do in life. I love being a part of all of that. So but that was also ego driven.
So so reflecting on our conversation, what would be the one thing you want people to carry forward from it?
One thing, carry forward, know your culture and probably know what kind of culture you want to bring the company and the rest of the world to see.
Mm,
And then be willing and committed to own it at any cost, whether you have to fire your best friend or fire everybody in the company and start over. Be willing to look in the mirror and admit whether or not you are the person you need to be.
no, that's a really good question because as they always say, what got you here won't get you there. You always have to be looking at what in you has to change.
Yeah.
So, Nicholas, this has been great conversation. If someone wants to follow your work or learn more about what you do, where do they go for that?
I'm active on LinkedIn, and I probably put out more content than I'd like to some days. I think we put out about 200 videos every month through
Wow.
various assets. But we have three brands, and we've got a lot of different brands. But and they made me the face of four of them. So yay. But LinkedIn is always a good place because Shelly always bumps those straight to me if anybody has anything they want to ask me. But um, It's a
And
great
you have a
place.
book? Where can they find its,
Yeah, the book is on Amazon. It's a biography of play.
mm,
I enjoy writing. It's probably my one of my few passions that I don't get to do enough of. But I do. That's kind of how I started, was writing my marketing material back when writing was a thing, when people could actually do it without hitting that GPT and the Claude
mhm.
button.
Yeah, very important. I'm very proud of the book I wrote now that AI is out here. I'm like, "No, I
I
really
know.
wrote that."
Yeah, it's really. Now I've seen a few AI books, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. I don't know what you've written here, but I don't think you do either.
It's awesome. Well, Nicholas, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and to our audience, until next time, make the decision, act on it, be accountable, and we'll see you next time. Stay unstoppable.